Good morning. It is July 9th. We're here for our regular scheduled county commissioner meeting. We have a full slate of commissioners. We have our administrator, Mr. Danzel, and our clerk of the board. And a great job you're doing. So at this time, I'll call the meeting to order and ask everybody to please rise and join me in the pledge. Okay, we got a pretty big agenda today. So the first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, it's been brought to my attention that it would be prudent to adjust our agenda. So I would propose that we would cancel our workshop, and the one item that was on our workshop agenda, that we would move that to F on our regular business docket, and that would be the last item on our regular business, and that would be discussion of the Hapo Center Sports Complex.
There's been a motion and a second to remove our workshop item and put it on as our F presentation of the Hapo Center on regular business. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Takes us down to public comment. Anybody in the room for public comment? Anybody on the phone? We've got phones available now to the public for public comment. Nobody's on the phone. I don't see nobody coming forward. We'll move down to the consent agenda. We have 4 items on the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of consent agenda items 1 through 4 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for the 4 items on the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion on them? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Takes us down to regular business. Presentation, Columbia Valley Recovery, presented by B.J. Olson, the chairman. Welcome.
Thank you. So I had provided a written report to you guys yesterday. I hope you received that. If you don't have it, I have it with me. I can give you a copy of that.
We got it.
So update on the Columbia Valley Center for Recovery. Construction is on track to open March 2026. Originally, we hoped that it would be either December or January. There was some issues with regard to state requirements that pushed that back, and the contractors are trying to help us get that open sooner rather than later, and so they're doing work on that. Currently, they're offering monthly tours. I believe it's the first Wednesday of the month, so if you would like to take a tour of the facility, contact Matt Rasmussen over at the Benton County, and he can get you on the list there. I think they're doing like a dozen or so people that sign up for that. And also, if that doesn't work out, you can contact him and he can arrange a different time. One of the things that we're looking at as a committee is kind of moving towards phase 2, which has to do with recovery housing. So after somebody's been in crisis and at the hospital level, where do they discharge to? And so we're looking at that as a kind of a second piece or second priority in terms of step down from the inpatient care. And so I would say just kind of in brainstorming phase on that. We haven't really made any firm movements in that direction, but that would be the next step. One of the things we want to take a look at particularly is in terms of budgets and whatnot, how much of the operations cost for the recovery center is going to be covered by private pay or insurance versus county dollars. And so once we have a better idea or a clearer picture of that, then we can move ahead with some of the other priorities that the committee has identified. We're looking at the field responder contract, and my understanding, the last we talked about it, is there was some variance in terms of liability issues of Franklin County versus Benton County, and I don't know if we have an update on that from the council or from the administrator on that, but as soon as we can move on that, the committee is still recommending that we have a field responder program there. I think the contracts have been written, and so it's just kind of in a holding pattern until able to make a decision on it. And that may have changed since the last I heard. That was like about a month ago. Let's see. Comprehensive Healthcare is the primary provider that's going to do the programming for the Recovery Center. They're looking at hiring over 100 positions, and so they're in the midst of revving that up. The subcommittees are working on outcome metrics and working on with Comprehensive Healthcare on that. The committee agreed to a facility logo and branding that was approved, I think, 2 months ago. Seemed to have a fairly good response to that, and just working on press releases and outreach and whatnot. There's been some money that has come in, contributions and whatnot. I think there was like $1 million donation for, there was an anonymous donation, and then some other fundraising that has occurred. One of the things that we're looking at is having a donor wall to add to anybody that's by a certain date has contributed money would have an opportunity to have their name on the donor wall. Currently, we're looking at probably about $9 million annual operation costs for the Recovery Center, and about I think about $1 million for the field responder. That's sort of the budget for that. Currently, the revenue, based on the report back from Benton County and Franklin County, is probably about $6 million a year and $3 million a year from Franklin County from tax revenues. Obviously, if there's private pay and insurance in the mix, that gives us some more dollars to address some of these other priorities that we're taking a look at. Let's see. Working with WC Tri-Cities and CBC and Workforce to try to work on increasing the behavioral health workforce. That's one of the challenges that we're going to face. Hiring 100 people from our community is going to pull from other providers and other programs. It's a lot of people to do that, and so we really need to work on developing a behavioral health workforce, and so we're taking a look at that as well. And then looking towards the future, conversations with other potential partners. We're, again, kind of on a holding pattern to see how much the costs line out before we get too far along in terms of conversations with possible grants or different programs that we would be taking a look at. So that's sort of the quick version, quick update. Do you have questions for me?
Questions, commissioners?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a number of questions. Thank you for being here today and for sharing with us. You described that you're brainstorming the second stage of the project as far as housing.
Correct.
My understanding is, though, that you've already received $3.8 million in grant funding for that.
Correct.
So having worked in that field, not very extensively, but a little bit, it takes quite some time to do that. And when you describe it as brainstorming, I'm not familiar with the process of brainstorming and receiving grant funding.
So the plan is on the campus to have it sort of phased. We'll do the Recovery Center and then look at improving other parts of the campus for the housing aspect. So we have talked about that, and I think that that's where the grant funding has been secured is in developing that as a possible program. In terms of the finer details in terms of the treatment for what that's going to look like, who is going to be the contractor to provide that service, that's sort of the brainstorming phase, what we want the program to look like.
So you already know what you're doing and where you're doing it and what it's going to take to do it.
Correct.
You just simply don't have a contractor in place.
That's probably in terms of, like estimated cost and being ready to do a request for proposal. We're not at that spot yet.
Okay. My understanding also is that there is not a contract in place for Comprehensive to operate the Columbia Valley Center for Recovery.
Correct. They are still in negotiation on that. They've agreed to the general outline. They're still working on particular budgets and whatnot.
Okay. With your describing Franklin County being responsible for $3 million a year, is that something that there's some kind of formula that has been brought out, or is that just simply saying we want all of the mental health sales tax that Franklin County produces to go to this project?
I don't believe that the actual dollar amounts have been settled in that. I think that was more or less just a projection of revenue more than it was.
So it's just simply saying we want everything that you're producing to go to this one project?
I don't think so. I do believe that in terms of private pay and insurance pay, and then also Medicare, Medicaid, there are going to be some other dollars in the mix that will be able to cover a significant portion of that $9 million.
Okay. So I expressed my concern to my fellow commissioners here recently that I've been going on quite a number of those tours you're describing, and having been in the building and construction oversight process for a long time, I described to them that I am seeing scope creep, mission creep, whatever people choose to call it,
Sure.
and trying to understand who's calling the shots and how that is being done. I'm sorry, this is to say it quite this way, but you didn't help my concerns by describing it, that the expectation is that Franklin County will give all of the mental health sales tax that is collected within Franklin County to this one project. And that is, my concerns were further increased with some of the comments that were made in the last board meeting of the Mental Health Advisory Board. There was things like that Franklin County has put a moratorium on the spending of these funds, which has not happened. And that Franklin County has already committed all of these funds to the Columbia Valley Center for Recovery, and that has not happened. I was told under no uncertain circumstances did Franklin County have any decision-making process, that we were simply a payer for or a user of this facility, and we would pay per room. And so I don't know that that I have a specific question within this. I just have been working hard trying to understand the purpose and the way things are happening, and it seems the harder I try, the less information that I've been receiving. And so that is certainly a big concern of mine at this point. I don't understand. There's not a contract in place for a operator to operate the facility. We've allocated somewhere very near $45 million for the center itself, additional $3.8 million for a housing component of this, and it seems the harder I try to understand, the less information I'm able to receive.
Okay.
And I would like the Mental Health Advisory Board to come and talk to us more often, so that I can have a better understanding. So that's all that I had right now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
So the 1/10 of 1% sales tax is generated how much in 1 year?
I do not have those numbers. I would,
Roughly, it's over $3 million.
yeah. I would imagine that you would have that somewhere.
Yeah. I have a pretty close estimation of what
Yeah.
it is. I will say that when I voted for the increase of 1/10 of 1%, it was not my understanding that it was all going to the recovery center.
Sure, sure. And if I spoke in a way that made it seem like that,
No, I mean, that's the way I understood it, but I just want to point out the fact that it's a much-needed service.
Correct.
And it's only 0.1%, and not to say only, but at the time when we voted for that, it was my understanding that we were going to try to reduce the transit by 1/10 of 1%, so there would be no additional cost to the taxpayer. And just for public knowledge, we pay 0.6% of 1% to the transit. So we're paying 6 times more for transit than we are for mental health services in Franklin County. And I just think the public should be aware of that, where their dollars are going. And
Sure.
And in my opinion, it'd be much better spent at the recovery center. So,
And also, I think there's probably some cost savings in terms of inappropriate incarceration, visits to the ER. There's
Sure.
other costs that are saved in that. So in terms of, I have no idea, and that's part of the reason we're trying to be conservative about looking at what future priorities we're going to be taking a look at, is we want to take a look at what that mix is going to be. It's not going to be $9 million Franklin, Benton County's money's going into that. It'll be less than that, but what that lands on, I'm not exactly sure. I haven't run the numbers. I could talk with Comprehensive and see if they have an estimate of what they think that mix would be, and bring that back to the commissioners so that there'd be more of a firmer number. I don't know if they would even be willing to say it was a firm number, but a ballpark number maybe.
well, thank you. I have no further questions.
So 1 million for field response program.
Correct.
I know out there in the blocks, we have a ambulance crew that is all volunteer. With the concern of what we've got going on in our community, I don't know why we got to spend $1 million. I think we should have some volunteers that'd be willing to do this instead of spending money. And with that, with a program like this, we are going to bring other people to our area that are going to need help. And so I'm thinking the people that got on this committee and stuff, they're showing a sense of urgency in serving. They're not getting paid for it. And I think we could probably look for some volunteers to do this. I don't know why we think we got to go out and hire personnel that you got to pay a salary to, a retirement to, benefits to. This is where government's getting upside down. And our tax revenues are on a consistent decline right now, 15%. So, and it's 0.01% for this. And transit gets 0.06. And I'm in favor of taking the 1/10 away, but I don't have the majority of the transit board to put that before the taxpayers. All I'm saying is let the taxpayers have a say on this. And they're the ones that'll make that decision. All we do is grant them that ability to make that say. And if they vote to keep it at 0.06%, I'm good with it. But why don't we give them the opportunity?
I agree wholeheartedly with that.
So all I'm trying to say is that, yeah, I was hoping that, this would be a self-sufficient, because we were talking about the people coming here would have Medicare, Medicaid, insurance plans. We're going to be bringing people in from out of town to be at this facility. I would think that that would generate enough income to be self-sufficient for the operation and maintenance.
I think that with the crisis response services, that what we're looking at is probably a blend of federal dollars, county dollars, and then private pay. I don't know that even with that, in terms of crisis response, the Comprehensive already has a contract for the crisis response services in our community. And so they'll be receiving funds for this. This would be to, in a sense, kind of beef up those opportunities to respond to calls that maybe our EMS or sheriff or law enforcement, so that they can respond to mental health crisis in that. In terms of having volunteers doing that, I suppose ideally being able to cut costs is desirable. However, I'm not sure that you will be able to get licensed professionals to commit to volunteering to be on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so at some level, you're going to have to pay people to be able to be available for that.
But, no, I don't want to interrupt, but we do have them out there already. They're called the police force. And that's what they were supposed to be able to get this person. They can tell they have a drug problem. They take them right to the center.
Correct. I think one of the things that having a crisis response team is that law enforcement is not always trained or equipped to deal with somebody that's in mental health crisis. And so the opportunity to do a handoff to a licensed professional who is trained in mental health crisis to be able to address those issues. I think that's really what that part of the priority that the committee identified has to do with. And we certainly received feedback from EMS and law enforcement that is a need that is there.
Thank you. Is there any further questions? We really appreciate you coming by today.
Yes.
We would like concrete numbers as close as we can get to them.
Okay.
Because we've got 0.01%, and that's about all we can afford, is that we can't put any more money into the game.
When is the next meeting?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. And is it on a regular cycle every
Yeah,
Thursday?
it's the I got it. Second Thursday at 2.
Okay. And where is it held at?
It's at the Kennewick Commissioners, the nice office upstairs,
Oh, okay. All right.
boardroom.
Thank you. And that's open to anybody that'd like to attend, is that correct?
Yes, and Brian, if you would like to attend, I think you are an non-voting member of that committee, so.
All right. Thank you for your time.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Appreciate it. That moves us down to item 2, a presentation on the Ben Franklin Council of Governments traffic count analysis presented by Mr. Martin.
Good morning. Thank you all for having me and Benton Franklin Council of Governments here to present on some, I'm going to move over here really quick. On some traffic count data that we collected in 2024, and then we will also collect starting in 2026. So we're the Benton Franklin Council of Governments. We're a regional planning organization. We convene local jurisdictions and counties to discuss and plan solutions. Commissioner Didier is the Franklin County rep for Franklin County, on our board, and Craig Erdman is the Franklin County representative for our technical advisory committee. I will run through these a little fast. I know you have a long agenda. So, overview of the program. The Regional Traffic Count Program is conducted every 2 years on an even number basis, so 24 and then 26, to collect data on vehicle volume, the type of vehicles that are traveling on the roadways, and the speed that they are traveling. The data is collected during the spring and fall and midweek, and you can see those tube counters up there. To be honest, I had no clue what those were before I started working here. They are pneumatic tube counters that compress, the air compresses inside of them when tires drive over them. We collect the data midweek to ensure that it's the most consistent with everyday traffic, and we make sure to do it when school is in session. So no winter break, no summer break collection. So as you can see on the video over here, vehicles are flying everywhere. Luckily, none of them have ran into each other yet, and that's the importance of the program, is to monitor travel patterns. It also provides data that supports planning. It helps guide infrastructure investments that leads to where projects need to be implemented for easing congestion, improving safety, and so on. It also provides great value as part of our board. Franklin County pays a certain due, and a portion of that helps hire a consultant. They go out and install the tubes or move them, and then provide us with all of the data. And then that data is dispersed to each jurisdiction and county. As you can see on the map there, you got Washington, Oregon, and California, along with Alaska and Hawaii. And we were informed that we're the largest tube count program on the West Coast, and that's specific to tube counters. It's kind of I guess you can say nowadays it's an old school method to collect data, but that's the only way that we've done it throughout our program. In 2024, we collected data at a total of 718 sites, and then 126 of those were located in Franklin County or requested by Franklin County. Well, not including Pasco and so on, but it was coordinated through Craig, Erdman, and Franklin County. So, now that we have 4 years of data, we decided to develop an analysis that highlights the top 25 average daily traffic locations and then top 10 per jurisdiction or county. So we started in 2016. You can see that in 2021, there's an asterisk there. We did not collect data in 2020 due to COVID-19 and the travel restrictions. And as those started to ease in late 2021, that bled into 2022, we collected data, and we wanted to keep it on an even number, so we relaunched it back in 2024. And the analysis identifies those highest average daily traffic volume locations along with heavy vehicle percentages. So, you can see the map there. These are the top 10 locations that recorded the highest average traffic volume. The number one, you can kind of tell it's the top three are down center. Those are kind of butting up against the city of Pasco city limits. So not a big shocker that those were the top three locations. I highlighted the three locations in orange as those either saw the most movement or had high numbers of heavy vehicle percentages.
So what are those numbers based on? Daily, monthly, weekly?
So it's the midweek collection. In that, are you saying
That 6,000 cars a day, or is it 6,000 cars a week?
average daily?
Daily average?
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Okay, and then, so here is the volume change from,
We got some music on the mic.
yeah,
Somebody's got their phone. Could it be Jen downstairs?
awesome.
Okay.
So yes, it is average daily traffic volume
Thank you.
from the midweek days that it's collected.
And number 4 is Taylor Flats Self-Landing Road out there at Douglas Fruit.
Yep, number 4, that's Taylor Flats south of Self Landing Road, which is number 4 up there, so just below, gosh, I don't remember that roadway, but you can see number 4 and 5 is,
Yeah.
yep, Self Landing Road is what it is. But, so that recorded a percentage increase in average daily volume when comparing 2016 data to 2024. And then you can see number 5, that recorded just under a 1% decrease in average daily volume. The location that recorded the largest increase is down at the bottom, number 10, Burns Road, east of Dent Road. And when comparing 2016 data to 2024, it recorded just over 54% increase in volume. On to heavy vehicle percentages. So our consultant classifies heavy vehicles anywhere from school buses, transit, all the way up to large multi-axle semi-freight trucks. So this is accounting when we do have school in session of the school buses. It is a very small percentage of the heavy vehicle percentage, but anything below that, normal trucks, motorcycles, so on, is not considered a heavy vehicle. The Glade, number 8, the Glade Road south of Clark Road, was the highest percentage of heavy vehicle use at just over 20%. And then you can see the Taylor Flats averaged around 15, actually over 15% when it came to heavy vehicle use.
And that makes sense because Glade Road is used more often for the big trucks than Taylor Flats because the corner there to get onto Dent Road and Columbia River Road onto Dent Road is so cumbersome. And we need a solution there. And they would take some of that heavy truck traffic off of Glade Road.
Absolutely. And that's what is so great about this, collecting this data, is it shows that and helps request funding for projects and stuff to ease that congestion. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Oh, that was quick,
Yeah, I ran
Questions?
right through it.
even with questions during it. Questions? How's the grant money looking for coming our way by the state and the feds in this solution for some of these problems?
So we just did a call for projects. I don't know the exact projects, but with Franklin County did get a lump sum of that. It's a big selection process, which you approved through our board.
I know,
yeah.
but the grant money, is it readily more available or is it declining? Or, because we know what's going on here in the,
That all comes down to us meeting our obligation targets for each federal fiscal year. We're hopeful to meet that this year.
Okay.
And that does play an effect on how much money we do receive to distribute to jurisdictions. But as far as updated funds and grants, we received a lump sum of $2.1 million that we distributed from 2026 to 2029, and then we will receive more funds in 2027 that we can distribute for 2029 up to 2032. So planning for those funds, but as far as federal and state other grant, that is all managed through the counties and local jurisdictions.
but you're not seeing a decline from the federal government or the state government?
No,
Okay.
no, only if we don't meet our targets. So it's very crucial that we do.
Okay.
Do you have any plans or ideas or even related to traffic control that's going to be caused or by the Amazon distribution centers or with Darigold?
So we are actually developing a regional freight plan right now. That will be a part of that plan. We have been holding working group meetings and stakeholder interviews to get a bigger grasp on what to forecast. And in 2050, we're doing a 25-year forecast. So that will definitely show the change in volume when those are going to have their average daily truck volume projected. So 395 is a focus as well too.
I have no further questions.
Okay,
All righty, well, thank you very much for
Thank
coming
you.
and sharing that with me
I appreciate
or
it.
with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, move down to Resolution 2025-210, enter transfer from contingency fund to the Commissioner's office to cover 2025 professional services presented by Mr. Danzel.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of this resolution that's before you is to authorize a $55,000 transfer it's actually from non-departmental reserve fund to the Commissioner's office in two major line items. The first would be professional services. You'll remember that we have brought on Genesis Herrera recently, and she has to be trained back up on all the same Board of Equalization and AR and AP. And so Shirley Jones out of Public Works comes and trains our deputy clerks. And so this is for a portion of that. And then a portion of the 55,000, the most severe portion of it would be for what you spent on me when I was here and as an interim administrator for hotels and lodging, and it blew it completely out of the water. So I have to raise my hand for accountability and say that that was on me. The total amount would be 55,000.
Questions, Commissioners?
Part of that also was the overlap with two interims as one handed off to the next. And so, no questions, sir.
I have no questions.
So this isn't coming out of the contingency fund, it's coming out of the, which fund did you say?
Non-departmental reserve.
Non-departmental reserve, okay. Okay, if there's no more questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve Resolution 2025-210 as presented.
Second.
Been a motion and a second for Resolution 2025-210. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, Mr. Danzel. Next, we have Resolution 2025-198, Franklin County Coroner's Office inter-budget transfer contingency fund, presented by Mr. McGarry.
Morning, Commissioners. This is, we're just revisiting from a few weeks ago. Back in December, when the approval for the construction of the building, the coroner's morgue, was approved, it was also agreed upon that the balance of the budget, or the balance of the funding, would come from contingency and from the Courthouse Expansion Fund. Now we have expended the funds from the American Rescue Plan Act, and so it becomes necessary now to transfer these funds so we can start paying our invoices for the continuation and completion of the building. Any questions?
Questions, Commissioners?
So where are you as far as being on budget?
We're right on budget. We're going to be just a little bit over because of the sewer system that we didn't foresee. Yeah. But other than that, we would have been under budget, so.
And what is the timeline for completion?
We're on target right now for either the first or second week of August.
Okay.
So just a month away or so.
I have no further questions.
Okay, so I got some questions here. Again, I brought it up last time you were here. There was a lot of talk about grant funding, and you have got some grant funding, but it's not near the amount that.
No, the grant funding that I got, that I was able to get, was for the equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not the construction part of it, so.
And then you spoke about an agreement or with somebody's going to give us $2,000 a month rental.
Yes.
Is there an agreement put together for that and for how
They are
long?
coming, in fact, today, the night, they're coming tomorrow to do another walkthrough and then start those agreements, start the discussion of that.
So it's not guaranteed, there's no agreement.
They want it pretty bad. So I'm 99% sure they're going to go with it. Yeah.
For how long?
They want to do it year by year for right now.
Okay.
But they are talking to make this more of a regional center. So they're going to be here for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah. It's,
And then, how are you interacting? I know we signed an agreement last week with Benton County.
uh-huh.
Things going good there with them?
Yeah.
They got
yeah,
their forensic pathologist there. They
They
got him there
did.
for 2 months.
Yeah.
So we're going to be utilizing that, correct?
Correct. Yes, we are. And we did yesterday.
That way we don't have to go over to Seattle anymore.
Correct. That saves us a
lot
lot
of
of money, gas-wise, time-wise, lodging. Yeah.
So I talked to the coroner over there, and in our interaction, I was asking about, well, you know, with this forensic pathologist, you're probably going to fill up. Are you going to need some space? And he hadn't even thought of it, and he thought it's a great idea. Would you be willing to work with him as far as what is your capacity for the facility?
Absolutely. We can
What
help
is your
him.
capacity?
Right now, with the equipment that we have, we will be at 12, 13. We
With-
do have some other racks, storage racks. you
With
know,
the ability to expand if you had
to
to?
expand, yeah. The
Because-
cooler that we're putting in will have more or less, let's see, 3, 4, 5, with the possibility of 20. And then we have our portable morgue that will hold 16. So we have, with that, we can return the favor, I should say, to Benton County when they're in the need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we're not getting it for free. We'll get some money out of that, correct?
They haven't charged us
Oh, they haven't?
for the use of storage. For the autopsies, they do, but for the storage, they do not. And so I would be a little bit reluctant to turn around and charge them back. But
Boy, we went out a lot of money for paying for storage. I didn't know that. I thought we had to pay for the bodies to be stored over there.
the agreement I had with them, we did not. The agreement they were going to have with the former coroner, they were going to charge.
Okay, when will we know if we're gonna be able to receive any funds? Because we're gonna be out a lot of money, and I'd like to see it, try to recover it. I know at the 2,000 a month, we're talking 20 years before we even get,
Yeah. And I think it'll increase. That's why they want to go year by year, and I think it's beneficial to us to do a year by year. I'll have more answers tomorrow, and in the coming weeks, we'll have some answers, because I think that's when they'll start negotiating and sending some proposals to us. And I can email those proposals on to you guys or to Brian and to legal also. Those will go through legal too, so.
one last question. With this facility, are we gonna have to hire a doctor?
No.
Who's qualified to do the?
We will do our initial exams here, which right now, when we go to Benton County, because they're busy, we're not able to do them. We have to wait until they're done, or else we're doing them out in the garage. And so with that, we will still do our initial exams here. And when it comes time for autopsies, we'll transport them over to Benton County for the autopsy, then bring them back at the conclusion of the autopsy.
Okay, that concludes. Anybody further questions?
What percentage of autopsies do you do?
We do about 24 a year. On the calls that we get called out on, we're doing about 180, 190 call-outs that we actually go out on of the 360. A lot of those, because we do we have our multi-stat drug analyzer, and so we don't do as many autopsies as we could do, because if they're a drug overdose and we're showing proof that that is it, then we're not autopsying them. A lot of counties will do autopsies because they don't have that resource, and so because of that, that takes out probably, another 20 that we would be doing at, an average of $2,000 a pop or more. So
Commissioner Baumann?
Thank you. The organization that you're in discussion with about the potential of leasing our facility to them, is it something that they're going to use 2 hours a day, 1 day a week? or
They're-
is it?
Right now, what they're projecting is starting out at least 1 week. I think it's gonna end up being more than that.
Five days a month.
Yeah. And that will be, what the plan for that is to give them access to that building 24/7. To give you kind of a insight on that is, they have a time window of a 24-hour period to do their recovery. And so they're talking, they want to store their equipment here, eventually even put a staff here in the Tri-Cities. And our facility would be used for that. So they're talking, transporting from Walla Walla, Moses Lake, Chelan, Douglas County, those surrounding areas, all the way down to here.
Reason for my question is, right now I have no basis of how much use it, is this 4 days a week, 8 hours a day, or is it, 1 hour a day, 1 day a week?
Sure. They usually, for a recovery, it averages 3 to 4 hours for them to do a recovery.
So right now their anticipation would be roughly 2 a week.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
So that would be the equivalent of occupying a space for 1 day a week
Yeah.
per month,
I see most of the time their recoveries are after hours in the evenings. That's just from the experience that I've got called on and my former job that I had too as a funeral director, we got called. It was usually evening hours that
Okay.
those were.
I appreciate that. I had no basis of what does the 2,000 mean? Is that,
Yeah.
are we getting the equivalent of, $500 an hour, or is it $22 an hour because they're using it all the time? So that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions?
I have no further questions.
So we're at this point here where we're gonna give you the ability to finish. Are you 100% certain you're not gonna come back for more funds? Because, we're in a decline for sales tax. And we're sort of writing off the whole contingency fund to finish this, so we're gonna be out of funds there.
If I could guarantee you, yes, I'd go buy a lottery ticket. But at this
I don't like
point,
to hear that, Mr. McGarry.
well, at this point, Commissioner Didier, there is no foresight of anything going over. I've talked to the builder. They don't see anything else. I don't foresee anything, no. I don't see anything that wouldn't allow the completion of the building with that. It's kind of like you baling your hay, you're gonna cut it, but what kind of price are you gonna get it? Can you guarantee me a price when you bale it? You can't. But I can guarantee you that this isn't gonna go over. If it goes anything over more, I would be totally surprised, and it's not gonna be thousands of dollars.
Are you pursuing grants?
Yes.
So-
In fact, I just called on one today to help some funding. I'm always doing grants.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve Resolution 2025-198 as presented.
Second with discussion.
There's been a motion, a second, call for discussion. Go ahead.
So I believe that we have two items here, essentially doing the same thing from different funds. The first item, I believe, is approximately $41,000. Is that
43.
43? Thank you. And the second one is approximately 460?
No, it's 257, 178, 80.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So we have a motion and a second for Resolution 2025-198. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Looking for a motion for Resolution 2025-211.
I'll move for approval of Resolution 2025-211 as presented.
Second.
Been a motion and a second for Resolution 2025-211. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 I vote nay. Motion passes.
Thank you, Commissioners.
We move down to item F, presentation, Eric Johnson on the Hapo Center and Sports Complex, partnered with Columbia Policy Advisors. Mr. Johnson, welcome back.
Thank you, Commissioners. I am going to escape out of this PowerPoint and get into another one. All right. Thank you. Again, Eric Johnson, and it's good to be back in front of you. Going to give you the orientation in regards to the work that you've asked me to work on and associated with the Hapo Center, the interlocal agreement with the City of Pasco, options for you to be thinking about in relationship to long-term decisions associated with not just Hapo Center, but certainly the property associated with that. So my presentation kind of comes in a series of slides. I think there's only about a dozen slides. We'll move through a number of them fairly quickly, but spend time on discussion and guidance and direction. We'll do a little bit of the background, look at the land itself, the initial track investment that was made when it was then called the Trade Recreation Agriculture Center, operations, what's been going on with operations, capital improvements, the planning process that has been going on with Johnson Consulting, not this Johnson, a different Johnson Consulting, responding to the City of Pasco. They did provide correspondence around their desire to continue to pursue an ILA and some things to talk about. Options and opportunities for you, and then next steps. And we will potentially have then an executive session to talk about a few land items as well. So the land was actually donated to the county in 1990. In fact, I was just talking with Commissioner Baum, and he had noticed as well that it actually, I think, came on October 12th, 1990 to the Port of Pasco, and then 4 days later was moved to the Franklin County. And I certainly don't have the history behind that. I've got a couple of names from folks that suggested that might know, but it's an interesting path that it took, and it actually took a couple of paths before that, and Commissioner Baumann can probably elaborate on that when as well here. Their current county ownership, and I will pull up a parcel map for you to take a look at here in just a moment. The current county ownership is 70.67 acres. There are a number of parcels that were sold out of the original donation. 5 parcels remain, including the 31-acre ground lease agreement that you had with the City of Pasco, where their softball field complex is at. And the City of Pasco actually owns an adjoining set of acres. So if you kind of take a look at this slide, and I can blow it up, and I've got another large one as well, so I could potentially be able to do that. Let's see if this, I don't know if I want to push anything here, because I'm afraid what might happen.
Slide your power on the left-hand side of that.
Yeah, that would work, right? All right, so this is the City of Pasco-owned property, the 62.65 acres. This is the acreage in 31 acres that was a land lease. That land lease has expired. It does, and Pasco has requested an extension through 2026 for that, if you'll recall. And that's where the 31 acres with the ball fields and the ancillary facilities to support the ball fields parking. What I call the Hapo Center is this 27.57 acres, including the Hapo Center, the ice rink area, and then the RV park. Parking areas And there are areas that are just not completely utilized, but are in grass. And I do know at certain times there is overflow parking associated with that as well. This parking lot is 5.89 acres of land. Then you have two undeveloped pieces. You have a 4.1 acre parcel and a 2.11 acre. So this area here comprises that entire ownership of 70.67 acres of land.
The red piece is excluded, that's.
Yes, yep, that was land that you previously, this is the, is it LifeQuest?
LifeQuest,
That-
yes.
Right, so that parcel is no longer part of your ownership. Any questions on the parcel? I just have a larger blow-up, so for those of us with aging eyes can kind of get a better sense of that. The initial track investment, this has been one where I'm still doing a little bit continued research on. Appreciate the Treasurer's Office. They provided a variety of information. The voters, I didn't realize that the voters actually had initially passed the first bond issue of a $2 million bond issue authorized November 3rd, 1992. With a fairly large yes vote, at least by today's margins, it seems like almost a 58% yes vote. The Treasurer Records actually notes that there's three bonds. There was a general obligation bond with limited bond. There was an unlimited bond of one at 2.9, one at 3.9, and one at $975,000. So there are three bonds. There actually is a notation in one of the bond documents that the state actually provided a set of resources as well. I think it was 2.5 million as well. So I don't know if that was ever utilized, but I suspect it was because the total first estimated cost was 9.5 million. So to get clear to that 9.5 million, I suspect that was utilized as well. Bonds have since been retired. Your interlocal agreement did provide for Pasco to provide 2.1 million in debt service assistance as well. And the interlocal agreement that kind of was first established in 1994 has, as you well know, been extended several times and is now set to expire in 2025, the end of 2025. Operationally, it has been managed by Franklin County, the Happel Center, the ice rink, and the RV park. Those are the facilities that we oftentimes get referred to kind of as Happel Center, but they really are distinct options. That the ice rink, as you well know, was one time managed by a nonprofit organization, has since been now managed jointly with the Happel Center by HWL, your contractor out there. The RV park has been a department of the county for some time now as well. Management administrative decisions are made by Franklin County per the interlocal agreement. Historically, it was a department under the Board of County Commissioners of the County Administrator. It was not managed, but recently in the past, really kind of the 3-4 years, it has been managed by outside parties, most recently now by the HWL Group. And they are managing the Happel Center, and the ice arena. The RV park is still being managed separately by county staff. The county has leased that 31 acres to the city of Pasco. That lease, land lease, as we have talked about, does need to be considered for an extension at the request of the city of Pasco, so we'll come back and talk about that as well. The county and city have split the annual operating deficit of 50-50. Most recently, that's been in the range of, operating deficit has been in the range of $300,000 to $400,000. So we spent generally, I think this last year, I think it was 160, I think for the county, 160,000 or so, and 160 for the city, somewhere in those vicinities. So that's been typically the operating deficit. And you entered into a 10-year naming lease of the Happel Center in 2019 at $100,000 a year. Again, these are just fairly high-level elements. The ILA talks about a few other things, including capital improvements. the interlocal agreement does describe how to engage the city with capital improvements. It does not appear that the county has ever exercised that portion of the interlocal agreement, which actually describes that you would probably enter into a separate interlocal agreement for the proposed capital improvements and any cost sharing for those capital improvements. So you do have that capability to do. But as you know, there have been many capital improvements within the HAPO Center, but part of it is, part of the interesting element for me has been is to define, and we saw this in the master plan process as well, what is the HAPO Center? Where is it just the building itself? Does it include the ice arena? Does it include the RV park? Does it include the entire 60 or the entire 70 acres? What are we really talking about when we talk about the HAPO Center? Some things to continue to think about and work on. But as you can see, there's a number of improvements that have been done with the ice arena on the property, the number of interior improvements here lately. We have the HVAC system upgrades that have been put in place and that are continuing to put in place. We have the backup solar battery backup system. So parking lot surfacing, which I think has just been completed, so happy to hear that. And we have some kitchen improvements. And other improvements have been identified in other studies and the master planning process as well. And some of those are described within the materials that I also presented to you. As you know, the sports complex master plan review and impact analysis is, I think, complete now by C.H. Johnson Consulting. Presentations to the advisory committee, stakeholders, the City of Pasco, council and staff, the Board of County Commissioners. It has provided a number of suggestions on next steps. But I think the step that I think we all know needs to occur first before you would even get into thinking about next steps within the planning process is to discuss the interlocal agreement as well as other management, ownership, interlocal agreement alternatives, funding options, coordination, and including clear up to the disposal of the property. So the things that we're going to look at and talk about today may seem fairly, I don't know, hate to say radical, but we may talk about some things that may be disturbing to some folks and may excite others at the same time. So the City of Pasco did provide correspondence to the county. I think it was following a meeting around the City of Pasco Council's desire to negotiate a new interlocal agreement. They had several items that they wanted to have discussions about in particular, including, governance, financial oversight, operating subsidy, the emergency capital needs financing, long-term financing, competitiveness and improvements in financing, softball fields, the ice rink, and master plan, and talking about the future implementation of the master plan. So the good news, I think, is you've got a partner that has, been thinking about this as well. I don't think that's any secret. You all have been thinking about this because you've extended this agreement, I think, 3 times since it originally expired. So it's definitely time to make decisions and start to proceed on decisions associated with the with just not HAPO Center, but with the entire 70 acres, and making sure that you chart the course that you are most comfortable with. And that's part of the items that we're going to talk about. So, I take the perspective in discussions like this in a process that sometimes is very offensive to people, environmental impact statements, but there's an element of that that is really helpful, and it allows you to think about scoping the things you want to talk about and study further, and then the alternatives that you create before you select a preferred alternative. And so when you enter, for me, entering into negotiations like this or a brainstorming process like this, is to say, what are the alternatives? Because out of that will come a pathway, and it may be a combination of these, it may be none of these, but it's going to stimulate the thinking and the discussion for you to collectively have that the ideas gel. I have heard many ideas in my, since I started with you all back in August and first came to you in July thinking about being the interim. And I've heard a lot of ideas about what to do with Happel Center, from where to stick Happel Center to what we could actually think about utilizing it in a really positive way for the community into the future. You have the opportunity, and I've elaborated on some of these ideas in the materials that I submitted to you as well, is you could just simply renew the existing ILA and say, hey, we're good. We are just going to take the existing one and put 30 more years onto it and move forward. You could recognize that we may not get there again in 6 months, but we do need to honor getting Pasco the ability to continue to utilize and schedule their ball fields into 2026. So you might think about doing something in a short-term basis, at least with the ground lease agreement as you look at other alternatives. We can renegotiate the ILA, and Pasco has set out a pathway to potentially look at that. They have suggested about 10 items that they want to talk about, and so we could simply renegotiate the existing ILA utilizing that framework. And Pasco also, in their communication, recognizes that the county may have interests that are in addition to the ones that Pasco has laid out as well. We could really start thinking about alternative governance, ownership, and funding models. You could begin to think that this is not the role of county government. This is not a business function that we, our citizens did want to be in this business potentially back in the early 1990s. That may not now be the same. So you could start to think about alternative governance, ownership, leasing to different groups. I know when I was a county commissioner, we were deep into senior services programs. We had money, a lot of money in the timber days in a timber county. That went away. We slowly divested 5 senior centers. We worked with nonprofits in all of those communities. We divested of something completely to non-governmental organizations. And so you can start to think about alternative governance, ownership, and different funding models as well. Commissioner Didier, I put this one in for you because I know you like going to the voters for taxation. We decided that we would, look at, okay, voters, we want to get this out of the county current expense fund. Do the voters want to pay for this again? They paid for it once. Do they want to create an operating capabilities, levy lid lift specifically for this purposes? So you could look at saying, we want this, we still want this, but voters, you got to decide whether you want this. So there's an alternative there. You could withdraw from the agreement altogether and just be done with it, and then potentially start to look at other things and other ways that you might want to manage, lease, and move into number 7, which is the last one that I will just briefly talk about, and that is to dispose of some or all of the property. And that is always an option. So you come from the point of we would just renew the current ILA, a whole series of other options too. It's no longer a function of county government, and we are going to divest ourselves of that and dispose of the properties. And you could do that in a variety of ways. You could just start to look, and we go back to the parcel map. You could go back and look at those parcels that are potentially what you would consider to be, they're not currently in use. And I think that totals about, 6 acres or so of parcels that you could just simply dispose of right now. They're not currently used as part of the overall operation. You could take a look at that and just simply dispose of them. You could look at that 31-acre parcel separately with Pasco and just negotiate with Pasco whether it's a long-term lease at some type of market rate or some other rate than the $1 a year, or include asking Pasco if they want to sell, I want to buy that property from you. So you could look at that parcel independently. And then C is the kind of followed by D, E, and F, which are all part of what I would say together, is looking at it as utilizing that surplus property ordinance that you just recently adopted. Is take a look at that, and you have 3 options that are kind of outlined within that, from a competitive bid to realtor listing to negotiated sale or lease. You could look at the market analysis first. You're going to want to do probably D, E, and F. You may want to do that under any circumstances to at least know what the asset that you have really looks like. The market analysis, letter of opinion, appraisal, need to select one of those. How far do you want to get? Obviously, from a letter of opinion up to a market analysis to appraisal, you're going to pay more for each of those, but it gets more accurate as you go. We're clearly, we've done some of the preliminary work on this, but really looking at what do you own? Are we confident that you own the title free and clear? Are we confident that there's no deed restrictions? Are we confident there's no agreements that were in place when the donation occurred? Are there any limitations? So, for example, what happens to naming rights? What's that agreement say? We would need to do more work in terms of analysis. Is there any restrictions with that original money if it came from the state back in 1990s? Was there any restriction on repayment of that? Are there any restrictions on the ARPA if we now sell it and we invested ARPA monies or coronavirus relief fund? So all of those types of things we would need to do more research into so that you have a better, clear understanding if you make that choice to go down, what are some of the elements to do that. And then, obviously, community partner and stakeholder outreach, if you are making that type of decision, that's a pretty significant decision for the community. And so I would definitely, we would definitely want to do a lot of that work. 30 years in the making. There's a lot of options to consider. I know you all have thought a lot about this individually, and but you've not had a lot of time to talk about it collectively, and for the public to kind of get a sense and hear what you're thinking about the future of Happel Center, the future of that 70-acre property. I'm happy to answer any questions and/or, Mr. Chairman, facilitate the discussion. I've coined the phrase, and I did this when I was the interim, it really is a generational decision. It's been a 30-year kind of a period of time that it has been this park available to the citizens and the Happel Center. But that doesn't necessarily mean the same. I was actually just cruising and doing a little bit of research. I was pretty fascinated to see the city of Edmonds is kind of in a similar position, and their part of it is financial decision for them. They're looking at divesting of a number of properties, including a long-term community center, a number of things that they can no longer, they think, continue to afford, but also the capital capability of what it might bring back from a revenue perspective as well. So I think a number of governmental entities are talking about, yes, it might have been some business that we were in before, but it's not the business we're going to be in the future.
Well, thank you, Mr. Johnson. It's a pleasure to have you back in here working with us.
Thank you.
Questions, commissioners?
I think it'd be beneficial to find out what the true value of it is.
So pursuing some analysis, that analysis of either an appraisal or a letter of opinion or market analysis, and potentially making sure we fully understand what ownership confident we know what the ownership is. I assume a lot of that work was done before you started selling parcels, because you have divested parcels before, so I'm assuming that some of that legal work was done. Jeff, you neither us were here, so that would be something that we would need to spend time with legal counsel and make sure that that we're confident that we know exactly what the ownership and any limitations on selling any of it would be.
I would definitely be of the same opinion as Commissioner Mullen of think it's important for us to know what the true value is. As you mentioned, I've been doing some study on it. I believe it was, I want to say approximately 4 years ago. We're part of the Washington County's risk pool, and they did a kind of an evaluation on that facility, and I haven't been able to actually lay my eyes on it, but I know that did happen. I know our auditor's office has done, to some level, evaluations on it. And then, as you mentioned, as a part of my research, and just for my fellow commissioners, for your benefit, there was a lot of action happened in a short amount of time. This land changed ownership 3 times in the space of 2 days. So let me get the dates correct here. All of these documents were recorded on October the 16th of 1990. But on October the 9th of 1990, this went from the Glacier Park Company, which is also known as the railroad. So this land was owned by the railroad, and it transferred on October the 9th, 1990. It went to Frank and Janet Teagues. And then on October the 12th, 3 days later, it was then signed over from the Teagues family to the Port of Pasco, and then that same day, October the 12th of 1990, it was then transferred from the Port of Pasco to Franklin County. In all those cases, there was no real estate excise tax due, and it was for the sum of $10, and I'll read it to you. For and in consideration of $10 and other valuable consideration in hand, conveys and warrants as it transferred hands. And so still doing some work on that. Have some questions out that I don't have answers to. But one of the questions specifically that I would have is, when this happened, it doesn't appear that there was a monetary contribution. Was there anything that was recorded or should have been recorded that went with the land that says "thou shalt"? Or was it a arm length deal that this was the process that they figured out was the correct way to do it at that time? And so I've asked that question and don't have the answers to that yet. But it's interesting. I had no idea that it was that's the way it was. I do have a number of questions for you, Mr. Johnson, and thank you for coming and doing this. I really appreciate it. I believe that you probably know this the Hapo Center probably as good as anybody that has to do with the Hapo Center today. So thank you for coming. So a question that I wrote down here: has Pasco provided any funding for the ice rink or RV park, either operationally or in capital when we build it? You probably don't have a way to answer that right now, but that's a question that I would have.
Yeah, I think the best to my knowledge is, I'll follow up with Pasco, but is no, they did not participate. In fact, in some regards, we're concerned that they were not consulted even about the installation of those 2 items.
Okay, thank you. And then on page 6 of your back right there. So this right here, Franklin County City of Pasco interlocal agreement includes $2.1 million to assist in debt servicing. Does that mean that we split that number and we both paid?
No, I believe the way I read the materials correctly is that Pasco did provide $2.1 million in debt service to assist
for the capital of this facility.
Right, for that $7.75 million in bonds.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they then provided $2.1 million in debt service.
So they have helped with the capital of this facility.
Yep.
So that's helpful for me to understand. I before this, I was not of that understanding. So that's helpful for me to understand. And then something that I do, I've said this before, I've shared with you, I believe it is in the best interest of our community, which comprises Franklin County and the city of Pasco, to extend our ILA with the ball fields for a year in the best interest of our community, so that we don't lose opportunity with scheduling softball teams, tournaments, that type of thing. And so I believe it is in the best interest of our collective community to do that as quickly as possible, so that they are not hindered or that we cause a unnecessary headache there. So that's my questions for the time being, Mr. Chairman.
The folklore around it, and I'm not sure anyone that was truly here in 1994, is the reason that Franklin County ultimately did all of the debt services, because Franklin County had the debt capacity. which is really true of many counties. Many counties have a lot of debt capacity. They very rarely borrow much money. And so otherwise, Pasco probably would have been the lead on debt service even at the time, but they just didn't have the debt capacity.
Okay.
So that's the urban legend anyway around why Franklin County took the lead on debt service.
I have heard that a number
Yeah.
of times.
All right, so,
If I may, Chair, I do have a
Yes.
comment on the consideration recitals you were referencing in those deeds. That $10 reference is common. You'll see that a lot in deeds, and it's basically just saying it wasn't a gift. So the consideration is usually larger than that, but it's just to denote that the property was not gifted. So.
And I think Commissioner Bauman's, your point is really good, and this becomes even more of a problematic element for you to have to think about is if there were separate but not legally binding title restrictions. Do you follow if there was a letter of intent that this be used for a trade, recreation, agriculture center? That was the intent behind supporting that, but the legal title doesn't include that. You know, I think that'll be a question about is there further legal restrictions around that?
That's really what my
Yeah.
question surrounds is there something that none of us having been a part of
Right.
it, is there something that we are unaware of? For instance, I was unaware that Pasco had provided a portion of the capital for this facility, and so that's helpful to know, and is there anything that is attached to the deed?
all right. I'm glad to see you were already aware of my opposition to raising taxes.
I've heard that a few times.
Yeah, so questions I would have would be, what were the input costs by the county and the city over the years for these 35 years? Because I know there were some years where we were going to the taxpayers for millions. It was high.
In terms of operations, on your operational
For
deficit?
the operation, what was the input by the city and what was the input by the county? You're supposed to be split, but I know that there were some years, I don't think it was. Question there. And then, of course, yes, they might have contributed and been part of that 2.1 million for the initial building of this, but we're to the point where the building is failing and now it's being rejuvenated, of which the county's putting all the money into it. We're not getting any cost share out of it. We have put the parking lot together, we put the HVAC systems in, we've expelled ARPA money, and yes, we need to look into the ARPA agreement. We got to make sure of that. We got to look into the HAPO naming agreement. You've hit on those. That's excellent points. Before we do anything, we got to make sure. I remember being in opposition of this back in 1990, my mom and I. We were in big opposition of it because they called it the TRAC, the Trade Recreation Agricultural Center. We never had one fair event. They had some horse stalls down there. I mean, we never had no 4-H FFA events there. It turned into a sports complex and an entertainment center. What is the role of government? Should we be into a sports complex and an event center? I don't think so. I think the best use of this facility and the acreage is to get it back on the tax rolls so Pasco gets some taxes out of it. Right now, there's no taxes being collected. And we're paying all these extra costs to keep it maintained, upbeat. It's got a good facelift, and it looks really good and appealing right now. So that's my comments.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One of the things to think about that if you were to continue with an interlocal agreement is better defined mechanism for capital improvements so that in a process that if you're going to co-share or who's ultimately responsible for that and rethink the how you would identify them, how you would schedule that, because it is a significant capital investment. That's that shell of that building is 30 years old. I suspect that it's, at some point, that shell will need replacing as well. So there's a lot of things to be thinking about if you're going to continue on.
Having been intimately involved with that facility as a commissioner for the last 18 months, you're correct. There's areas of that building that's failing that needs to be updated and addressed. We have begun the process in quite a number of ways. Thank you to everybody that's been involved in that, and we have a ways to go. And so, where are we headed with that is a question that we need to wrestle with and answer. And for me, I think that one thing that I believe that we need to be careful with as we have the discussion is to not, and this is difficult, this is a difficult challenge to wrestle with, that we don't say that Pasco is one entity and Franklin County is another, because we are one community. If you had to parse it, do you say it's the incorporated and the unincorporated area? How do you do that? Because whether Franklin County is the one that operates and maintains it today in its current form, it was still our community that built this facility and has funded it. And so that's something that as we wrestle through this, I don't want the community to feel like that we're saying that we are the county and you are not a part of us. And I want to be, careful in saying that we need to wrestle this carefully, because it's not as if that we are discussing private business and the way private business is done, because that is not the way this is. So I appreciate some of the bullet points that you've put here for us to consider and wrestle. And I agree with you that there's people that are not going to like some of the discussion points, and there's people that are going to like some of the discussion points. So I do appreciate that, but you're correct. It is a difficult conversation that needs to happen.
Commissioner Baumann, you raise, I think one of the most difficult things that I think cities and counties collectively wrestle with is when we are corporate entities. And so we begin to look at our corporate interests, which are oftentimes financial. We really focus on that. And so that does become one of the things when we act as corporate entities versus public bodies. And so you're constantly, I think, in that tug and pull between we're a joint public body, public bodies. 80,000 of the 100,000 residents in Franklin County are also city residents. We deliver a subset of services to residents in incorporated areas, but we are the local government to the unincorporated residents as well. And so it's this constant tug and pull a little bit, and it is one of the questions you will be kind of having to wrestle with a bit, which is, continuing to remember that those 80,000 residents are county residents. They pay county current expense fund. They don't pay the road fund, but they do pay the county current expense fund. So they have certainly been contributing to both the Pasco share and the county share of operations in some regards for this facility.
I appreciate you being able to articulate that much better than I could. Taxes is one thing I've tried to understand, and I feel like the more I study, the more complicated it gets. But you described it well in that the city residents are also residents of the county, and they also pay their proportionate share within that model. And I didn't decide that model. You didn't decide that model, but it is the model that within which we operate, and it's a challenge.
Yeah, and I always quantify this a little bit, is that property tax they pay, but believe me, cities do much better with sales tax than counties, because that's where the sales tax generators are at. They are inside city limits, and that is only going to continue to intensify with the urban growth, with urban growth areas and the Growth Management Act, is that they always promised, the legislature always promised to come back and fix this broken tax system for counties that only got magnified after the Growth Management Act in about the same time this was being done in the early 1990s. And they've never come back to fix the fact that we are primarily dependent on property tax. If we get a big urban growth within the urban growth area, a big sales tax generator, by, cities do the same thing that we would do if we could, which is they go out and annex it because it brings in money. And if we could do the same thing, we would do it. We got to be honest with ourselves. So, they are definitely property tax, paying at the same per thousand rate that a unincorporated resident is paying, and but cities are generally much more fortunate in generating sales tax, but they also have higher urban level of services than our rural residents get as well. So it's a really interesting push and pull on the difference between cities and counties.
Yeah, part of that as I've studied and learned and tried to understand, and certainly have not come to any level of expertise on it. But you spoke of the sales taxes. So I don't have the most current one, but the Hapo Center generates more than $10 million a year in economic stimulus in the local area, of which that we get our small percentage, but the city largely benefits from. It also generates. I know that they have this, and I don't have the numbers to quote to you, but the hotel motel tax, some of those kind of things. The Hapo Center has not benefited from some of those things with which it stimulates, and so it's not a simple cut and dried answer. It's a
Yeah, and it's another example where, similar to the capital investments, where we could reconstruct an interlocal agreement differently, and who pays more for capital improvement, since it's 80% of the, most of the revenues coming from it from an economic development perspective, as well as, try and access some of those funds that the city does generate from hotel motel tax because of it. So there's definitely opportunities if as we start to narrow and think about narrowing some of these options and going down a couple of paths from finding the value of it and proceeding down potential divesting of the property or some of the property to then also a radical reconstruction of the interlocal agreement too. So.
one thing that has been a significant concern of mine for many years, certainly far before I ever considered the idea of becoming a county commissioner, is, as Commissioner Didier said, I watched this grow up out of a field. I watched this facility be built, and it was the Trade, Recreation, and Agricultural Center. And I can't tell you how many hundreds of events that I've been to in that facility, and it used to have a much more trade and ag related. I've been to many farm shows in that facility that I loved and looked forward to. And when they were multiple days, I tried to go multiple days because, when I was a little kid, I liked to see the tractors and the chainsaws and all that kind of stuff. And that has certainly diminished significantly over time. And the concrete paving of the arena really stuck a nail into that coffin of it. This is no longer an animal able to be used as a facility for horses or cattle, rodeos, any of that type of thing any longer. And so, as I see it today, it is a facility without an identity. What is its purpose? Because the purpose with which it was built no longer exists. You can't use it in that way. And so that part does concern me, because the purpose with which we built it, we no longer use it for. And that was where my question became, what's the pedigree of where this started? And did somebody give it to us and put a requirement on it?
So I know that there was maybe a need for an executive session on this topic. Do we need to go into executive session at this point?
If we did, we'd have to follow the guidance in the Columbia River Keeper case, which essentially requires us to we would need to discuss the factors that affect value outside of executive session, and then you could go into executive session after that and then specifically discuss price. So it has to be sort of narrowly focused.
I'm just asking if we need to go into executive session. I
Right.
appreciate the explanation, but do we need to?
I think it's up to you if you want to talk about anything associated with that. I would say, I think from a direction, you could finish your meeting and we could go into executive session. I don't think we need to just
Do it right now.
go right into it
Okay.
if you want to do that, and that'd be fine.
Well, that was my question.
I had a comment too on the ARPA stuff. There's guidance on that, and it's tied to the award of the SLURF funding. It's in the Code of Federal Regulations, but under the Treasury guidance for those types of awards and capital expenditures, it does require some type of repayment if it's tied to a capital expenditure utilized for that purpose. So in other words, once the federal award is no longer needed for the underlying purpose and we declare it surplus, it triggers requirements under the federal law. So
And do you know how long that requirement sticks for?
I think it's for the life of the project.
So if you have an HVAC unit that was paid for 25 years ago and it is obsolete, you still carry the burden of the value of that AC unit that was paid for by other funds?
Not necessarily. I was kind of overly simplifying it. You could probably depreciate the value, but it's in 2 CFR 200 311, dealing with real property. There's specific guidelines in
Or
there.
potentially the building of the structure itself, if we receive state funds, we would potentially have to repay state funds that was used 30 years ago to construct the facility.
No, I was talking about ARPA funding specifically.
But it's potential. We would need to find that original agreement that the state had with then, I think it was, I don't know, it might have been CTED at the time, Community Trade Economic Development.
Right,
but-
that's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, and
I was
so-
talking about ARPA.
Yeah, so I think that'll be, in that one section in the report we talk about, is that would be one of the things that if we're going to get a market analysis, if you want to know property restrictions, we would start to identify all the things that we think we need to make sure you're aware of in terms of, while you might think you're generating this much money, you might be paying back this much money as well. Yep.
Yeah, I appreciate you being thoughtful in that, because you're right. It's complex. As I've started studying over the last number of days and trying to prepare for this, right now we have a lot more questions than we have answers.
Thank you.
All righty, if there's no more questions, we'll move on with the meeting, and we're down to the Commissioner Administrator updates. Mr. Danzel.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I've got a couple documents that I'll be sending your way. I met individually with each commissioner to discuss the agenda. The documents that I'm sending for your review, one is a multi-pronged, if you want to take one and pass the rest down, public records request that you gentlemen are being asked to provide any documentation that's applicable. And
Just
it's
one copy?
timely. Yeah, one copy each. The other document that I'm going to send your way is a potential, or the proposed, rather, ILA between Benton and Franklin County for the production of the fair and rodeo. If you want to take one and pass it down. That would be something that I think would be appropriate for you all to review. Let me know what you're thinking. We're going to need to give an answer to Benton County on that sooner rather than later. But it's a pretty big change in how we do business right now. And I won't get into that over my update, but just if you could review it and take a look at it and let me know the direction you want me to go. I also wanted to bring to your attention that our lobbying contract is up for our statewide lobbying. And so I wanted to, give you the heads up about that, since we're not in a legislative session, but also kind of have it on your radar as to whether you want to continue with the same firm or if you want to maybe look elsewhere. And again, I would say if you want to let me know so that we can get to work on that by next week, that'd be great. Want to thank the budget team for working diligently on multiple policies. For next week, I'll have available for your to take action on the reserve policy that you all had asked for me to work with these folks on so that we could have an actual shot at putting aside some funds in a reserve fund so we would meet the standards, but also if we got in a pinch that we'd be able to draw from something and not just be left flat-footed. I did meet with a portion of folks that were concerned about the upcoming fair, so concerned citizens regarding this fair, not just the ILA, but this next one that's going to be put on. And finally, I met with the clerk of the board, Alvarez, office assistant Herrera, to discuss getting some of these policies across the finish line. The result of the meeting is that we think we could tackle a policy every week. So if there's identified policies and priorities that we've talked about, that we actually put it on the agenda and we are able to tackle one per week, it'll keep us accountable. It won't be so overwhelming and daunting of a task that it's not doable. And it'll keep us in a way that we can make all the changes that you want to policy and that makes sense within a year's time and not have it be so daunting and so overwhelming. There's not a ton, there's some areas that we're not going to have to probably touch, but with that, and one of the things that I wanted to include with that, and something that I think is very important, I'd like to, if possible, and most of these it would be possible, I would like to provide any changes that we want to make to policy to the elected officials at our elected officials meetings and department head meetings. So that it's not catching folks by surprise, that they can tell us, hey, this isn't going to work because of X, Y, Z. It's just good to be open and transparent with that and let everybody, first of all, understand what's coming down the pipe, but also, you know, be able to tell us if we're making an error. We want to know if we're going to be making something, a policy that's just going to be ignored anyway, then what are we doing making the policy, right? So that's kind of what I was thinking there. By making our processes more uniform, and that's the goal, we want to make these policies make sense, and so that no matter who's sitting in this position or who's sitting in your seats or who's sitting in the role of clerk, that we're not sitting around, going around making exceptions to the rules. There's a real issue with that in governance, and so this just makes things more uniform. It makes everybody play by the same exact rules, and I think that's needed. I believe we get into trouble when we start making policies that aren't followed or aren't enforced. I think deep down, everybody knows that that's not a way to run an organization. And so I want to be upfront about it so that you can know that, yeah, we're going to be tackling things where there have been issues in the past because of this discrepancy of, you know, being able to provide exceptions. Finally, and this is going to be a big one, this isn't going to be a generational decision or anything, but this is going to be a big implication to our budget. I met with Larry Ziegler to discuss the new Office of Public Defense standards and mandates. The workload mandates are to be phased in over a 10-year period, and I think we all know that the state missed the mark on this. Outside of King, Snohomish, Pierce, and Thurston counties, I don't know how any county is going to be able to budget for this the way it's currently written. And so there's kind of the, what Larry, I think, is kind of putting on your guys' shoulders is, if we don't want to get stuck with this, it might be incumbent upon this board to try to reach out to our partners at the Council of Governments, at WASAC, to drum up support for this issue. It's going to be there anyway. You're not going to have to do a lot of selling, trust me, because there's nobody that can afford this. Even in King, Pierce, Thurston, and Snohomish, there's a shortage of attorneys. And so there just wasn't a lot of long-term thought given to this. And it's something that I think we should take the lead on if it's something you're interested in. Sorry that I had a wordy update, but there was a lot at play there. And that's my update for this week. Of course, if there's anything I need to be working on, you just let me know.
Thank you. Mr. Bauman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could, a couple of comments on your report. When policy is not followed, what is our recourse?
They're put on
a
double
loaded
secret
question.
probation. No, I'm just kidding.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah, so that's when the policy's not followed, supposedly there should be some ramifications for not following the policy.
We recently passed a policy, litigation communication policy, and I have not seen a single example of that making any difference or of us being communicated with about that at all. And so that's why that I asked that question. Second, I believe that it would be in our best interest if we were to ask our administrator to work with our OPD manager to draft a letter from Franklin County to the Washington State Association of Counties about this caseload standards and the implications and and what it will do to us. The Washington State Association of Counties has started looking into this, and they were even to the point of considering asking if the legislature would consider coming back into session to have a discussion about this. And so you and I have visited about that, but I think it would be in our best interest if this board asked you to work with our OPD manager to draft a letter and that we would send to them. Mr. Ziegler understands this issue because of his institutional knowledge, certainly better than I do. And I think that might be in our best interest to do that. With that, I also had a number of meetings with different people concerned about the upcoming Benton Franklin Fair and Rodeo, and a rapid swing of the pendulum of how that facility is being operated and the changes that are being done and how it's being done and cost and expense and lots of concerns there. So I've had a number of in-person meetings and fielded a number of phone calls about that. Had a lengthy meeting at TRIDEC with our local jurisdiction partners in relationship to the shoreline reconveyance efforts that have been underway, where that the idea is to reconvey from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers land along our shorelines back into the local jurisdiction's control. And so we, a number of months ago, agreed to jointly hire legal counsel with expertise in that area with Indian Affairs and specifically to assist with the it is cultural rights easement that may potentially be attached to that. And so we have retained a lawyer jointly with all of the rest of our local jurisdictions that are part of the shoreline reconveyance, and felt like we had a productive meeting. I've been a part of that group since I became a commissioner, and felt like that we made more progress in this one meeting than we had in all of the last 18 months. So really thankful for that progress. Meeting with the PA's office, multiple meetings with our administrator, and just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Erdman and your team for the Happel Center parking lot. It looks fantastic. I wasn't able to go last evening to see if it had been paint striped yet, but I know that it's fog sealed and it looks fantastic. And I've got a lot of compliments of how much better it's looking, and just feel like we've made some really neat progress there. So thank you for that. And Mr. Chairman, that's my report.
Commissioner Mullen?
So last night I did have the opportunity to go by the Hapo Center and take a look at the parking lot, and it looks wonderful. And thank you to Commissioner Bauman for pushing for that, because that's something that has needed to be done for quite some time before it got to the point of no repair, but it does look great. Also, I have concerns about the Benton Franklin Fair. County really has no part of that. That's a separate entity. They do a fantastic job. And I'm not saying that because I'm from here, but I have worked fairs all across the nation. I don't think you're going to find a better ran fair anywhere. It's ran mostly by volunteers that do a fantastic job, and I just want to compliment them on the great job that they do, and I do support the fairgrounds, the rodeo, the Fair Association, and their endeavors there. They do a great job. You know, it was not always so. You know, years ago, it was just a constant battle and argument, and things have really changed there. and they have a great staff. Lori Lancaster does a fantastic job of running that fairgrounds. And other than that, I think the county should stay out of it and let them do what they're good at. So that concludes my comments.
This last week, agenda meeting with Mr. Danzel, and then had a meeting with Mr. Johnson on the Hapo Center. Had phone calls and texts about the Pasco City Council meeting last night about the zoning change out there. They've allowed all those houses to be built out there, and now they're zoning it for apartment buildings right next to it, big apartment buildings, and people are very upset. I understand there was quite a lot of people going to show up at the meeting last night, but I've tried to reach out to one of them that contacted me, and I couldn't get a hold of him before our meeting. But it's an injustice when they zone for houses and they build those nice, beautiful homes, and then they put apartment houses right next to them. Then had calls and talked to people, and people are wondering, when are we going to get back to paving roads in Franklin County? And I said, well, we're finally getting the money back into our road fund, so hopefully we can start seeing that happen. There is a need. I know our road graders got a little behind, but they got caught up in my neck of the woods the other day. Did a nice job. They're putting water down now and making those roads, those gravel roads, nice. But it'd be nice to see paved roads again being added out there in the blocks. And as far as our policy goes, there needs to be a clear definition of the ramifications if they don't follow our policy. We need to put that in there. And as commissioners, it would have to come from the budget. We're the budget setters, so they would have to lose funds. That's quite simply, that would get them in line. And that's what we got to put into our policies, as the ramifications if they don't follow the policy. And it would have to be part of their funding. They would lose funding. That would stop it. That's the end of my report. Takes us down to correspondence. Prosecuting Attorney Office approval of backfill 2 essential vacancies.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I spoke with Tormika Lucas at the prosecuting attorney's office. The prosecuting attorney has 2 openings that are both actually grant funded. They're important positions too. The crime victim advocate and crime victim advocate coordinators play an important role, and it's something that the courts are utilizing more and more often. It's budget neutral, it's grant funded. It's my recommendation that we approve those hirings. And I would just like to say too, it's been a pleasure getting to know and work with Ms. Lucas. She's no nonsense. I enjoy getting to talk with her, and when she presents something to me, I've, over this process and period of time of getting to know and work with her more, I really enjoy what she brings to the table. So what you see is what you get on this. It's just a backfill of 2 essential vacancies. Both are grant funded, both are needed. I would hope that you could move it this week so it'd get them out in front of it.
My only question is, when the grant funding runs out, are the positions still funded by our budget?
I've had a great discussion with Ms. Lucas on that, and she's very well aware that we're not in a position to where we can supplement any expiring grant funding. So, yes, they're very well aware of that.
And the positions then would be eliminated if there was no more grant funding?
Correct.
Okay, I'm good with it. Is this a consensus you need with the commissioners?
A motion would be the best if I could get that.
I'm prepared to make a motion on that. Excuse me. Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the prosecuting attorney's office request to backfill the 2 essential vacancies that are wholly funded by grant funding.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for the approval of prosecuting attorney office approval to backfill 2 essential vacancies only with grant funding. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, takes us down to an executive session, or no, public comment. We got public comment. Is there anybody in the room for public comment? Anybody on the phones?
Good morning, gentlemen. I really appreciate the probing questions regarding the mental health facility. I kind of cringed at 100 employees right out of the gate. And I would suggest that as they get to certain levels of people coming to facility, they continue to hire and not just come out of the blocks at 100 employees. And that those 100 employees can serve on call with the police and certainly should be expected to. It used to be the hotspotters were supplied by our hospitals. They had people they paid to go out into the community and with the police officers. But if Comprehensive Health is going to take this on, I think that they should be the ones being out in the community and not just work 8 to 5. I mean, that's the need here. And I continue to look at the Envision model that Dr. Ben Carson put together for facilities like this, because you have to go somewhere else for SNAP and somewhere else for food stamps. And when you have one building where each of these entities can have an office and evaluate somebody and all their needs, then they get taken care of and those grant dollars get used. What I don't like to see is a top-heavy organization with a lot of pay and not a lot of money going to the very people supposed to help. And that's kind of what I felt today for the first time. I'm very supportive of it because it's a joint effort between our big five. But I think that hiring people should be on number of occupancy and time instead of just, oh, we've got 100 people and now we're going to pay them all. I'd say caution on that. Furthermore, regarding the traffic study, this is the same traffic study. I worked in the county road department. I set those pneumatic tubes. We don't need an independent consultant to do that, and I suggest we save money and have our own traffic counts and design them. I think we've got a very qualified Mr. Erdman that can do that. Not slamming you that it wasn't done. I'm just saying you can save money on consultants with that. That is not a difficult job. And what I heard is we're going to take care of the freight. Well, I went down and visited that community input regarding, putting railway along our Snake Rivers to eliminate the transportation by barge. That is what is in mind here, and that's what he alluded to. And I would be in total opposition of something that does not take a lot of infrastructure at the time because it's already there. You cancel out the transportation on federal waters here, that repercussion will automatically go across the country as a precedence. And we don't transport troops and munitions here, but they sure as heck do across the rest of the country, and the waterways are very large in this country. So that's what's coming from our governor's office to this study and to this gentleman. The calming traffic thing, when people buy houses and build houses on major throughways like Court, like Argent, like Sylvester, and they shrink it from 4 lanes to 2, I don't think that presents a good calming thing. I think it's going to affect our boat race traffic and attendance, which also builds up revenue. More to say, but thank you.
Anybody else for public comment?
So Commissioners, first I'm going to apologize for keep coming up to public comment, but something came to my attention on Monday that I think all of you gentlemen need to know, and so does the public. One of our applicants that came in for a conditional use permit and was at the Planning Commission came in to pay $5,000 that she was solicited to for a wire transfer. It comes in under my name, Franklin County. It's been scammed off the information we've put on the website. And we reached out to the other 2 applicants. I have one more to reach out to make sure that they're not falling for this scam, and to urge them to turn this in to the Sheriff's Department for any investigation that can be done on it. It's probably international. Don't know that we can do much, but I'd hate to see anybody send wire money to somewhere else. And I know you gentlemen are very well aware of this, but I want to make sure the public is aware of the fact that all of our fees are published. All of our fees are paid in advance. And we're very transparent with our fees. We never ask for money after, and especially a wire transfer to my department would not be appropriate. Any wire transfer would be through the treasurer's office if that was the case. But just want to make you gentlemen aware that this scam is happening. Want to make sure the public's aware this scam is happening. And I would feel real bad if someone actually did follow through the payment. Thank God this lady came in to our office, made us aware of it. She wanted to pay the payment. We told her it was a scam, told her to follow up with the sheriff's department to file a complaint. And again, we're reaching out to the other people to make sure that they're fully aware and not falling for this inappropriate information. But I figured that was important enough to bring to all of your attention. Thank you.
Certainly, thank you.
So, Mr. Danzel, on that note, we probably should put a notice out there, an alert notice for all of our constituents in Franklin County because of that one person that came in there. I know there was 2 more that received it, and we need to make our citizens aware of this scam that's going on right now. Probably make a press release to the news, too, so that they could print it. All right, is there anybody else for public comment? Seeing none, we'll move down to an executive session. Do we need one?
Real quick here, let me jump in if you don't mind. If you actually need one, I would consider truncating the amount of time. This is kind of one of the few executive session exceptions that gets challenged quite often, and municipalities utilize incorrectly. So I would just say it's really, you got to get to the brass taxes pretty quick. You don't want it to, I don't think we want it to be an hour long, and that's if you need it at all. So it would be, if you all have any business to discuss in executive session, it would be your determination. If we utilize our RCW that we're looking at, I would just recommend to the board that you make it for the shortest amount of time you think you'd need, and then it would be better to extend than to go in for a really long amount of time, because that's where I think you could get into trouble. That's my
Well,
advice.
it says real estate minimum price. Is that what we're going to discuss, or we're going to discuss whether the fact that we want to keep this facility, or do we want to even look at selling it? That's,
and-
is that
And
illegal to
again,
talk
that-
about?
That's the type of factor you would need to discuss in open session.
It
has
is.
to be more closely tied to the minimum price. In fact,
Okay.
even factors affecting minimum price, you discuss first in open session and then go into executive session after. That's sort of the process for this exemption to apply, is you discuss the factors first, then go back into executive session and sort of nail down the brass tacks in terms of what you think the price ought to be.
Mr. Chairman, my opinion would be, is that I would, if I were you, I would add action item to the agenda, and I would ask Mr. Johnson to get an appraisal. That's what I would recommend, is to have him do that, and then we'll have a better understanding. I think it'll give us time to really get this right as far as when we talk about it, because what Council Briggs just said is absolutely correct. It's that if it veers at all from just the minimum price, there's been challenges that they've won against municipalities that have done this incorrectly. So my recommendation to the board would be to add an action item, and that action item would be a motion to have Eric Johnson get an appraisal. And then this is maybe a little premature, maybe after we get an idea of what that market is, then we can have this discussion. Does that sound? Okay, that's what I recommend.
Mr. Chairman, it'd be my opinion that, that we should have a potential action item added to our agenda, but I also think that I have in front of me the case where that was recently litigated that people have concern about, and believe that we should have a executive session. And here's just a short excerpt. It says, to discuss how this, only to discuss how this factor will impact the bottom line price. And I think with the scale of this discussion that we have in front of us, that is something that is important to do. And so I would I would like to see us go into executive session for 20 minutes under RCW 42.30.1110(1)C, real estate, for 20 minutes, and then come back and we could amend the agenda at that time.
Second, if that's a motion.
There's been a motion and a second to go into executive session on a real estate item. Discussion.
I don't believe it's necessary to motion second and vote on it. I think, Mr. Chairman, that is your discretion, and I would yield to that.
My discretion is, we've been advised not to do this. I don't want to get into a challenge here
I
on.
don't believe we've been advised to not do this, just to be very narrow in our scope.
I think
Right.
we've been advised to get an appraisal, because I don't know how we can discuss any price when we don't have an appraisal in front of us. But my question is, how much is that appraisal going to cost? What is that?
Right. My concern is the presentation wasn't directly focused on the value. It was just listing that as an option. And so I think we'd want to get into a little bit more detail in terms of how the characteristics of the property might affect the asking price for that property, and then go into executive session
Okay.
to nail down specifically, now that we've discussed those factors in open session, specifically, how do we believe those factors would impact the price?
So we need to discuss that first before we go into executive
Right.
session. If you want to do it today. If we want to do it today. Mr. Johnson, can we ask your professionalism on this?
Yeah. Again, Eric Johnson, I think you had good discussion earlier. I think one of the next steps clearly is, as we talked about, is to pursue, and I think if it's an appraisal, that is one choice. That'll be give you the most precise estimate on and range of what that property is worth in its entirety. And we can work with an appraiser. I can bring you back an estimate of what that would cost to have an appraisal done for that 70 acres. And then you could perhaps proceed at that point with simultaneously, potentially, then to talk about the characteristics and the other factors associated with the price.
Okay, so one thing I would like my fellow commissioners to maybe think about and entertain would be, we've often talked about a Booker auction sale of this property, but I would like to also entertain a thought of a Booker auction for the lease agreement of this property. What would somebody be willing to lease it for 10 to 20 years? So that we have revenue coming in, but we don't have the responsibility of making these codes. But if we lease it, we would still be responsible for making this clean energy code, correct? Yeah, because we'd own it. So it would not alleviate us of that. We would still be on the hook of the fine that we're going to incur because we can't meet this clean energy building code. And that's going to be on the taxpayers' back for every year. So I guess that wouldn't solve our problem. I've sort of talked myself out of it. So I think we're in a pretty tight situation here with the fact that we can't meet this clean energy building, and it's going to be a cost that we're going to incur every year. We are in the role of a sports complex, master entertainment with events and an ice rink. I don't think that's the role of government. So I would be more inclined, and we're in the public forum, I'd be more inclined to ask the Booker Auction if they wouldn't mind doing a sale of this property on a bid. Open it up to the public. Let the high bidder win, but we could put a minimum on it. And appraisal would give us the opportunity to know what that minimum should be. Just my thoughts.
I do appreciate what you're saying, Mr. Chairman. I think that I have no conflicts after having read and approached this as far as the size and the scale, the parcel. I mean, we know the parcel numbers, the exact size, that the bare land old buildings, and I think that very narrowly, this is exactly what the purpose of this RCW is for, and is to have this discussion. And a part of that discussion surrounding what is your minimum price, is that the right avenue? That's my belief in the way that I read it, and I have no conflicts in having a narrow discussion about that. Or I shouldn't say conflicts, I have no reservation about being able to have a conversation about that.
I can quote from the Columbia River Keeper case, because the Supreme Court of Washington offers some sort of guidance in that case about how the process is supposed to play out. So I'm just going to quote from that case. It says, to the extent that various factors directly alter the lowest acceptable value, the governing body may discuss how those factors impact the minimum price. This limited scope does not permit a general discussion of the contextual factors themselves. Any such general discussion must occur at an open public meeting. Once the relevant factors have been discussed in public session, then, armed with this knowledge, the governing body may enter executive session. There, the governing body can apply this knowledge to set a minimum price. So that's sort of the framework. And it's one of those things where I totally agree with you, Commissioner Bauman. This, when I look at that and read it, it's like, how could you not discuss the external factors that affect the price in executive session? That seems to be the clear intent of the law, but that's not what our Supreme Court is saying. It's one of those classic, well, the lawyers are, saying the words don't mean what they appear to mean on paper. So that's why you got to be careful about this one in particular. And my spidey sense is tingling here on this one.
So there's a motion and a second to go into executive session. And what's the will of the board? Commissioner Mullen?
What is your recommendation? I mean, I think we
We
need to get an
we
appraisal.
could. It's a classic "it depends" attorney answer. I mean, we could, but we've got to, I think, follow this framework that the court's outlining, where we first discuss factors and then go into executive session armed with that knowledge to set the minimum price.
Mr. Danzel?
It's kind of our job just to protect you all. I think I consider this one of those moments. I think it's ridiculous that you can't go in and talk about this to a further degree, but it is what it is, and we just wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't tell you that it's probably just not a good idea, unless there's some dying need, there's some real big, I don't get the impetus for it. Like, I think if we get and it doesn't have to be an appraisal, it can be one of the other options Eric had listed, but it gives us the opportunity to go out, get some data, and then just with the amount of eyeballs that are on counties and how many people sit around with a notebook and check off how many times you go into executive sessions for how long, I just recommend that you don't do it.
Okay.
Hold on
So
a second.
do we make a motion then for an appraisal, I guess, or we're asking you to find out what the cost of that appraisal will be first?
Yeah, I think perhaps, with, by next week or the following week, I bring you back a proposal for,
Okay.
for
Why don't we
someone to do an appraisal.
Let's do that. Yeah, let's do that.
I think that will also better inform your discussion once you go into executive session then as well.
Exactly. Okay,
I'm okay with that, yeah.
all right. So with that, then, is there any other business for the good of the county?
We actually,
So,
oh, go ahead.
so Mr. Chairman, do we need to make a motion to instruct you to go and bring us back options?
I think we already did.
I don't know if you need to do a motion for that activity. I think I've got pretty clear direction and next step. It's certainly within the scope of my agreement to do that work for you. And then we'll either talk about amending my agreement to compensate for that, or we'll do a separate agreement with whoever the appraiser is.
Thank you.
There is a executive session on here for an hour. Do we need to amend the agenda to take that off?
Yes.
It would be better for cleaning it up.
And then also, we are going to need an executive session or litigation.
We do need one. For how long?
We'll go 15 minutes.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to remove the executive session for 1 hour.
So, Mr. Chairman, I move to amend the agenda to remove the executive session that is printed out on our agenda and to change 110(1)(I).
Yes, 110(1)(I), litigation that's been filed, so it's actually under 1I, triple I, and then I would be there along with Mackenzie and the board, as well as county administrator.
So, Mr. Chairman, I move to amend the agenda to remove the executive session as was published and to go into executive session under RCW 4230-110-1I, triple I, for 15 minutes under litigation or potential litigation with the Board of County Commissioners, the administrator, and our legal counsel.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to remove the executive session of 1 hour and to go into executive session for 15 minutes. All in favor, say aye.
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 So, under other business, before we adjourn,
Other business? Yes.
if you don't mind, I'd like to ask just a couple.
Before we go to executive session.
Before we go into
yeah.
executive session,
Okay.
just like to ask the questions about this interlocal cooperative agreement between Benton County and Franklin County for the Benton Franklin Fair and Rodeo. Have we ever had anything like this before? No. What is the purpose?
They're raising our fees. Go to second page, look at the fee
I
increase.
saw the fees, but we're not paying a fee now because the fair is its own independent organization.
We do pay a $10,000 fee, don't we?
To the Fair Association.
Fair
Fair
Association. This is the Benton County. If they're wanting us to pay up to $100,000 for naming rights, when they reap all the benefit of all the sales tax generation
Yes.
from that fairgrounds,
And they entice all the Franklin County citizens to come over there with their pigs, hogs, and the show, and to spend their money over there, and then they want us to pay even more.
this is, I am not in favor of this.
I am not either. So there's two commissioners that are not in favor of this. So we don't have to talk about that no more.
I think that you have a unanimous direction that you can send this back and say no, thank you, we're not interested.
Okay, message received on that.
Polite way of saying it.
I got you. Thank you.
All right, so at this time, we'll recess into executive session we'll go in at 11:18, gives us a minute and a half to get down there for 15 minutes. Okay.
We also have 10 minutes closed session at the end for Mackenzie, just so you guys are aware. It's on the agenda, but it's under, it happened. It was on there.
That's all right. That means we'll be back up here. We are back from executive session with no decisions being made. Is there any other business for the good of the county?
No.
Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Now we got a closed session.